Good evening, good evening, good evening. Blessings, blessings. It is Monday, and I am back for Dominion Mondays. And I want to welcome you in tonight for another segment of Dominion Mondays. So glad to have you. So glad to see you here. Peace and blessings to all that are joining, to all that will watch the replay. Peace and blessings. Peace and blessings. Thank you for joining me on Dominion Mondays. So I have set out on this evening to conclude our series on the Dominion Mandate. We're going to conclude that series, and on tonight, we are going to talk about God's command to man to subdue. God instructed us, He commanded us, He mandated us to be fruitful, to multiply, to replenish the earth, and to subdue it. And so tonight, my message and my title is It is Up to You to Subdue. It's up to you, it's up to me to subdue. Now, I had all of these notes on subdue that I was going to come and I was going to speak from and teach from. And then as I was preparing to come on, literally about an hour and a half before I got on, God changed up the whole message. And so I'm going to shamefully tell you that I am going to read from some notes because I know that I probably won't be able to remember and recall all of the things that was downloaded just before I jumped on tonight. So forgive me ahead of time for reading from some of my notes, but I promise you there is a message of subdue, and it is up to you to subdue. Peace and blessings to everybody coming on. Peace and blessings. Thank you for joining me on tonight for Dominion Mondays. The first thing I want to tell you is this. It is absolutely a privilege. It is absolutely our power and our authority to subdue. This power and authority and this privilege meaning also rights, this power, this authority, this privilege for us to subdue, it deals with us being equipped and being empowered to subjugate, to tread down, to bring things under our control, and to conquer. So when God says that we are to replenish the earth, and remember from last week, I talked about our mandate to replenish in the earth has to deal with the work that God has ordained and assigned for us to do in the earth. That is the replenishment. Behind that, God says, replenish the earth and subdue it. And so I want you to know and understand on tonight that in order for you and I to subdue, we have to understand it is our power, it is our authority, it is our God-given and God-mandated right to subjugate, to tread down, to bring things under our control, and to conquer. That is a great mandate. That is a great privilege. That is a great responsibility that man has, or that God has given man in the earth and for the earth. And so I want to submit to you that the work and the mandate to subdue has an offensive element to it. And so I know I'm probably going to have fans of sports on here. And so hopefully this message will resonate with you, that the work to subdue, the power, the authority, the privilege to subdue is an offensive work. It's offensive. And so the work to subdue, we have to have offensive tactics in order to carry it out. Now, when we define the word offense, so when we play offense, that means it is an act of attacking. We're going to attack the end zone. We're going to attack the hoop, if I can use some of those sports analogies. But the offense, or to be on offense, is the act of attacking. Offense can also be defined as the side that is attacking or seeking to score in a contest. And so our power, authority, and privilege to subdue requires us to be offensive. It requires us to be on offense. Now, in order to effectively subdue, there's some things that we must equip ourselves with. And I just want to thank you for joining me on tonight. But in order to successfully and effectively subdue, in order for us to successfully and effectively conquer and bring things under our control, we have to equip ourselves with at least 5 things. And this is not an all-inclusive list. If we want to be successful and effective in subduing, we first must have a mindset of attack. So we've got to have and be in a mindset to attack. We have to, and in having a mindset to attack and having a mindset of attack, that means that we're going in with the intent and with the goal to attack and to score. It's not a defensive position that we're in when we're talking about subduing. But we're talking about going in on the offense, going in on the attack. And we have to have a mindset prepared, willing, ready, and able to do so. The other thing that we have to have that accompanies this mindset of attack is we've got to have a strategy or a plan to do so. We can't just haphazardly go into subdue. But we've got to have the mindset to attack and subdue, and we've got to have the strategy and the plan to go in and to subdue. Next, when we've got the mindset and we've got the strategy, God is going to equip us with the resources to carry out the strategy and the plan to subdue. So first you got to have the mindset. Now you've got to have that backed up with a strategy and a plan. And you're going to have that backed up and endorsed with the resources to carry out that strategy or plan. Next, we need the appropriate weapons and artillery to go on the attack to subdue. That's why you see oftentimes the Apostle Paul speaking about the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. He talks about the armor of God. These are the weapons. This is the artillery. This is the armor that we need in order to subdue. And then lastly, we need allies. We need partnership in order to help us preceding, during, and following the attack of subjugation. We need all of these components to successfully and effectively subdue. But it doesn't stop there. So, what am I talking about when I'm talking about subduing? I am submitting to you on tonight that subduing is intentional and strategic warfare. So, when God tells us to subdue the earth, that means we must be prepared, we must be armed, we must be equipped, we must be trained for intentional strategic warfare. So, how does God train us? How does God prepare us? He does that through the battles that we have already faced. Recall now, before David could face Goliath, before he could face that mighty, big, humongous giant, God gave him and prepared him by way of shepherding the sheep in his father's field. And in doing so, those battles that David fought in protecting and shielding the sheep prepared him for the strategic battle that he had to face with Goliath. And so we cannot discount, we cannot discredit the battles that we have had to face, because those battles have prepared us for the intentional strategic warfare that we have to subdue the earth. Here's where we got to be careful, though. As true subjugators in and of this earth, we must understand when warfare is necessary. See, oftentimes and many times we indulge in unnecessary warfare, meaning that we get in and engage into fights that we have no business engaging in. No business. And in that unnecessary warfare, we invite the enemy to come in on an attack that we aren't ready, we aren't equipped, we don't have the necessary tools to effectively fight. And so true subjugators, they have the ability to not only discern when the warfare is unnecessary, but they are prepared. They understand whether or not this is strategic and intentional warfare, or if it is unnecessary warfare. And so I submit to you, do not lend yourself as a subjugator in the earth and of the earth. Do not lend yourself to unnecessary warfare. Let me tell you why. Because when you engage in and when you lend yourself to unnecessary warfare, you are going to zap yourself. You are going to drain yourself of the things that you need for the real attack. You are going to drain yourself. You are going to zap yourself of the resources and really the strength that you need for the real attack. You're going to use it on the unnecessary warfare that you really should not be engaged in. So let's go a step further. So now God tells us to replenish the earth and to subdue it. And remember last week I talked about the replenishing, and the work of replenishment is the work. It deals with the work that we have to do in the earth. And so we have a job to replenish, or we have a work to replenish, but we also have a work to subdue. And we have to defend the work that we are doing in the earth. And you may be saying, well, I thought you said that this is an offensive work, and it is. But there's also an element of defense that we must play too in the intentional strategic warfare. But I don't want to get off track, so let me get back on track to my message for tonight. And the message is this: it is up to you to subdue. And when we say that it's up to us to subdue, if we are subduing in the earth, if we are to subdue the earth, what is this earth that we are assigned and designed to subdue? And I'll break that down into two parts. There are two earths, or two elements of the earth. That's a better way to say it. Two elements of the earth that you and I must subdue. Here's the first piece. The first earth, the first and foremost earth that you must subdue is you. I'm going to say that again, just so you can catch it. The first earth that you must subdue is you. We know from the book of Genesis that God formed man from the dust of the earth. So that is what really shows us that we are the earth that must be subdued. Okay. Now, where the first Adam failed in being able to subdue this earth or this flesh, the second Adam that we know as Jesus Christ came in and showed us the pattern, and he was the prototype in how we are to subdue this earth known as you and I. Okay? There are 4 realms, 4 dimensions or measures, or 4 distinct parts of this earth, this flesh that we must subdue, we must bring under our control, that we must conquer. The first element of this earth that we must subdue is our mind. Your mind must be subdued. And I'm not talking about with any kind of foreign or chemical substances, if you know what I mean. But our mind must be subdued. What am I talking about when I talk about the mind? I am talking about that place of your thoughts, that place of your logical thinking, that place of your imagination, that place that draws upon and brings up certain memories, that memory bank. That is what I am referring to when I talk about the mind. The Apostle Paul tells us, he gives us a blueprint on how we are to subdue this mind of ours. 2 Corinthians 10:5, it instructs us to cast down what? There are 2 things we are to cast down. That is those imaginations. That is everything that seeks to exalt itself against the knowledge of God. We cast those down. That's how we subdue this mind. And then Apostle Paul tells us that we must bring into captivity what? Every thought. He didn't say some thoughts. He didn't say just the pleasant thoughts. He didn't say the evil thoughts only. He told us to bring into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. So the first piece of this earth, of this flesh that we must subdue, is the mind. We got to cast down imaginations. We've got to cast down every high thing that seeks to exalt itself against the knowledge of God. And we have to bring into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. The other thing that Apostle Paul tells us to do, as it pertains to the mind and as it pertains to subduing this mind, he tells us that we must renew the mind so that we may be transformed rather than being conformed. So in renewing the mind, we step into a transformation rather than a confirmation. So subduing the mind has to deal with us having control of those thoughts, those thinking patterns, those imaginations. But subduing the mind also brings about a transformation. And I'm still talking about subduing, and I'm talking about subduing this earth. The first piece, the first place we have to subdue when we're talking about this earth here, as we've got to subdue that mind. The second place that we have to subdue when we talk about this earth is our language, that tongue, our words have to be subdued. In Proverbs 18 and 21, it tells us clearly that life and death, or death and life, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. And so, see, it almost goes without saying, it's almost intuitive that if we are to subdue this earth that we know as our flesh, and if we subdue the mind, it will follow that we will begin to subdue the language, that we will begin to subdue the very words that come out of our mouths. And so if we are to subdue that language, then we must understand the power behind our words. Here it tells us, Proverbs 18 and 21, we have the power of death or the power of life in our very tongue, in our language. And so when we talk about this offensive work of going on the attack and subduing, it comes through our language and our words. We want to subdue this earth. We want to subdue this flesh. We have to subdue the mind. We have to subdue our language. And we must subdue our appetite. And I'm not talking about what you go out and you eat on a Friday night with your family. But when I'm talking about appetite, I am talking about that inner man and that inner man's desires. That appetite must be subdued. Going back to the Garden of Eden, if only Adam and Eve had subdued that natural appetite, had subdued the appetite to want to know more, right? If only they had subdued that, then things could have been different and they may not have encountered the fall. But because Adam and Eve's appetite had not been subdued and had not been brought under their control, they fell. And consequently, man fell with them. But thank God that the second Adam, Jesus Christ, came and showed us a better way, showed us how we can subdue. We can subdue this flesh. We can subdue this appetite. Ecclesiastes 6 and 7, it tells us all the labor of man is for his mouth, meaning that we labor after our appetites. We labor for those desires. We labor for those dreams and ambitions that come to us and that appear to be those appetites. And yet and still, even after all of our labor, even after all of our toiling, that appetite, it says in Ecclesiastes 6 and 7, yet the appetite is not filled. So unless we subdue that appetite, we will not be able to successfully subdue this earth. The last and fourth element that we must subdue in order to subdue this earth, known as you and me, we must subdue our finances. We must subdue our finances. 1 Timothy 6 and 10, it tells us, for the love of money. It doesn't say that money is the root of all evil, but the love of money, the inordinate affection for money, that longing desire and chasing after money, that is the root of all evil. And in fact, it is that inordinate affection and desire for money, that love for money, that it opens us up for other things to come along with that desire and pervert it. And so that's what Timothy is really, he's warning us against. And he wants us to take heed to that. Ecclesiastes 10 and 19, when we're talking about subduing this earth, we're talking about subduing the mind, we're talking about subduing the language, we're talking about subduing the appetites, we're talking about subduing our finances. Wise stewards know this, and that is money is an answer for all. In some translations, it tells us that money is an answer for all things. So when you want to subdue your finances, you've got to understand that money is going to answer that which you send it out to. It's going to answer that. The first place, the first earth, first and foremost that you must subdue is you. So when God says subdue the earth, he is speaking, and hopefully he's speaking through me to you on tonight to confirm and reaffirm that we've got a work that we must do within ourselves to subdue. Subdue our minds. Subdue our language and our words. Subdue our appetites and our desires. And henceforth, subdue our use of and stewardship of our finances. Can I tell you, if you can't subdue you, God can't trust you to subdue your promised land. That is the other earth that you are mandated and assigned to subdue. So you have to subdue you, and then God has given you a promised land, i.e., physical territory for you to subdue. But many of us cannot walk into our promised lands and subdue that promised land and subdue the enemies that surround that promised land because we can't subdue us. We can't subdue this flesh. And so I'm going to close on this. It is up to you. It is up to me. It is up to us to subdue. The work of subjugation, the offensive work to subdue, it starts right here. It starts with us. It starts with this flesh. Once we get this down, then God can bring us into a place where we are ready to subdue the earth, which is our promised land. You see, the children of Israel could not go into their promised land. They were not yet ready to subdue the enemies that were in their promised land because they had not learned to subdue themselves, that earth known as their flesh. But I submit to you on tonight that God is accelerating the times. God has a work for each and every one of us to do. And that work must be done. That work is an offensive and defensive work. And unless we learn how to subdue this earth right here, we will not be equipped. We will not be empowered. We will not be confident enough to go out and subdue this earth, to subdue the land that he has promised us so that we can advance his kingdom. My message to you on tonight is to subdue. It is up to you to subdue. Peace and blessings. May you be empowered to go throughout the rest of this week. May you learn, and may Holy Spirit speak to you even the more clearly. May Holy Spirit give you even more wisdom to go out and to subdue you. I'll see you here next week. Good night.